Yeah, I don't know. I feel like for immigration, it has to be kind of put through like a moral lens kind of thing where you kind of have to say,
Yeah.
what sort of powers do you want border guards to have? And what kind of powers do you want politicians to have to make decisions about who gets in and not? And I tend to be really skeptical about that because, and I also, from economic perspective, I don't think that jobs work that way, really. I don't think it's like you have a lump of jobs and then you have to divide them up between people. It is, I'm not sure about the actual demand in that kind of way, but I feel like you can't really plan for that kind of thing because it kind of really exaggerates the amount of power and knowledge that political planners have. Like, it's not like the United States said, okay, like 20 years ago, they didn't say, okay, over the next 20 years, the unemployment rate's going to go to like 12% in 2009, and then it's going to go to like 4% in
Yeah.
2019 or something, like there's no real, I don't know, thinking behind it, I guess. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad that you mentioned the moral element because I don't know anything about the economic element of that. So the moral is the only one that I that kind of guides my opinions there. Yeah, I don't really have anything amazing or like new or scintillating to say about it, but it is going to be something that we're dealing with more and more. We meaning like people on Earth, because obviously, climate crises are going to bring about more and more human movement. And I remember I have some friends who work with immigration law and relief, and I don't know if you've heard of No More Deaths, the
Yeah.
organization, yeah, that tries to just do basic humanitarian stuff for, I think it's mostly in the Sonoran Desert between Mexico and the US.
Yeah.
And I remember hearing the, I don't know if I'm paraphrasing this or if this is actually the phrase, but that movement is a human right. That, like, I think it's essentially like an open borders argument. So I kind of like dismissed it a little bit at the time because I was like, okay, well that's very nice to hear, but it's a little simple, right? But I actually don't know what I think about that. Like, is it oversimplified or is it not? I'm not sure. Do you think that people should, like, how much control do you think the state should have over who goes where?
Yeah, I guess, and again, it's one of those things where I feel like there is a problem to put yourself in that kind of position of planner that's going to actually make those kind of good decisions and set the level at the right level. I feel like it's much more reasonable for someone, say in my position, to just say, I can just admit that I don't like the laws and don't want them to be there if there was some way to do that,
Yeah.
and that I don't think that, if there was some easy way to support people that were, being repressed by laws, that even if they kind of, I mean, like if there's it just, I feel like you kind of have to think of it from almost like a micro political kind of way of not really thinking like you're the, boss of the economy or something like that, because we're not, we're
Yeah.
we're kind of like the peons. We shouldn't have to kind of take a kind of like boss mentality about it, I think. Yeah.
So you're saying specifically people in our position, meaning like not really any political power?
Yeah, I mean, but I mean, yeah, as a politician, even I don't even really. I mean,
Okay.
I don't know. I don't trust the politicians to think. But I mean, if you're just like a random politician, I think you should just take basically the full side of immigrants, because I don't know. Those are the people under attack in a lot of ways. I don't know. So
Yeah.
I wouldn't. I don't know. I do think that there is kind of a stake sometimes in trying to think of like the rational policy for any kind of given situation, because
When the moral one is so much more compelling.
yeah, and also just that the policy position, I don't know, it tends to be kind of like layers of interests and conflicting kind of things where you're sort of trying to divine what, like, some middle ground between the interests that are involved, and you're not really actually doing the policy work that sort of needs to be done. You're kind of doing what's more reasonable. I think the healthcare debate is also clear like that from kind of the opposite way than we were discussing earlier, where people kind of come up with all the good reasons why coverage shouldn't be extended to people. They kind of
Uh,
see all the bureaucratic problems it would create and stuff. And I think that happens with immigration too, where people kind of go, well, no one would agree to open borders, so then we don't even talk about it or something.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, I don't know. I feel like anything that makes you end up kind of supporting the border police repressing people to look kind of like you're in the middle or something is not, I don't
Yeah.
know. I think it's like a trap. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm also not really well versed on the ins and outs of like what the issues are and how it relates to the economy and blah blah blah. But I tend to think like it's there's certain things that are just like morally intolerable, and I think treating people like putting them in these camps and like shooting them if they cross the border and all this kind of stuff, like whether it's a socialist state or not, I don't think that really matters. That's just not tolerable. Like that shouldn't be happening. So we need to figure something out that does not have that happening. Like if we have a system that requires us to act that way, we need to change the system. It doesn't really matter if that is we need to do this because that's part of like we need to protect our economy. Well, no, if that's what it requires, then we shouldn't be doing that. We need to figure something else out.
Yeah.
It brings to mind a lot of stuff like that Giorgio Agamben wrote about in Homo Soccer, about like bare life and the way that like refugee populations and whatnot, how they're kind of like stripped away of political rights until they're just bare life. They're just like a human body, like just their physical thing.
Yeah, to contrast with the citizen thing that I brought up earlier, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Like stateless people are barely even people.
Yeah, I mean, he makes the point that like the further that you extend the concept of the citizen and the idea of human rights to like, oh well, our state grants all of these rights to the citizens, well then the people who are not citizens get less, And so to me that's the problem. It's the fact that we have a nation state model, and I don't think that's really workable anymore if it ever was. And so I would personally, I feel like open borders is a moral obligation. Like I don't think anyone really has a right to be like policing where people go. And it's less about the conceptual argument. It's more the fact that people will come and go, and I don't think the solution is like, well, we need people with guns to make sure that is limited. Like that doesn't make sense to me. That's not something that we should have human beings doing to each other.